Hey guys, welcome to the Dice Matrix. My name is E.T. Eric Tarver, and I am your host for this top 10 favorite or best game mechanics. You guys can argue with me down below if you disagree, but these are my top 10 best mechanics in the game. You know I love games, and many games take up multiple mechanics in a game, which makes it the best. Right now, I am just going to go right to the list, and without further ado, let's get it on! So coming in at number 10 is role-playing mechanic. Now, I know that some people will say that's not a mechanic, but I went to a couple of websites and I was looking up the different types of mechanics just so I could have a wide assortment to make sure I wasn't overlooking something that I really enjoyed. And one of my all-time favorite games, of course, is Dungeons & Dragons. Now, role-playing, there is storytelling in mechanics like Near and Far, but that's not really role-playing. I mean, you could play Pandemic and tell yourself, hey, I'm a scientist and I'm help saving the world. You get a power or two, that's fine, which I like in games with having variable powers and such. But the thing is, with role-playing, you can play it as a tabletop game as well as play your character. It's like you're doing an actor's performance. And I think that those are the best interactive games that I've ever had, because you're playing within a character and you're trying to usually work cooperatively unless you have a negative group and you have one person just trying to the other guy in the game, or bang, bang, bang if you're playing Deadlands or Star Wars. But great experiences. Role-playing is my number 10 mechanic, and I won't say anything else about it except for I just love being in character and sitting at a table with a bunch of friends and, being like a smuggler in Star Wars, or in D&D being, something exciting like a sorcerer, because I really love to throw the magic around. All right, guys, we'll move on to the next one. Coming in at number 9 is set collection. Now, set collection, a good example of that would be probably in Five Tribes. Excellent game where there's many things going on in that game, but one of the great scoring aspects in that game is the set collecting in it. And they do it in a lot of different games. But I like the idea of not just, collecting all the points, but it's the fact that it harkens back to when I was a kid and I played like Rummy or something. So, it's real easy. Everybody understands, you get 3 5s or 5, 6, 7. You're going to score points at the end of the game for having those points out there. And then you just move that to the next level, like in Five Tribes or these other ones for set collecting, where each unique set that you have. So it's like, this scores 15 because I have all 5 of these. But if you only have 1, it scores 1. Just a great mechanic in a game that I love as an addition. Now, I've never seen a complete game where that's the only mechanic, but I'm sure it's out there. I just haven't come across it. But a great mechanic in a game, and that's my number 9. Okay, my number 8 is the Modular Board. To be a good example of this would be something like Mage Knight, or maybe Zaya Legends of a Drift System, where the game board just expands as you're doing it, and it changes each time that you place them out. And a lot of times in these games it has a lot to do with exploratory, but not necessarily. But in this particular sense of Modular Board, it definitely is a great experience for me, because I like the randomness that each time you have to deal with how the board lays out, and it feels like you're just exploring a whole new world. Now, this is not to be confused with like tile laying, which is something like Carcassonne, which is its own creature, which is a good system, but that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the modular boards. Well, that is my number 8, so we're going to move on to the next one. Coming in at number 7 is deck building. Who doesn't like to shuffle a bunch of cards? Well, in deck building, you start with just a very small amount of cards, right? And then as you play, the cards you select out of a trade row or acquire somehow, they just continue to build your deck. And the more that you draw and cycle through your deck, you get better and better cards, and it becomes more and more fun, and you get to do more things. A good example of this is like Star Realms or Dell of Merchants. There's so many out there. The original king of deck builders, Dominion, that do this so well. But deck building is one of the first games that when I saw the mechanic, it just kind of opened my mind to it, and I was like, whoa, this is neat, And even though when I teach some people who've never played games before, I usually show them Dominion. Now, later on, they kind of get away from it because they find things that they gravitate towards that they really enjoy better thematically, because Dominion's kind of themeless. I think pretty much everybody agrees that. But when they first play it, they've never seen anything like it. it is a fantastic ability, just, the deck building process. So coming in at my number 7 is deck building. And my number 6 is variable player powers. Now, this is a feature of a game that I really like when you're playing and everyone can do something different that someone else can't. A good example maybe is, okay, how about Tokaido? A very zen, basic game, but just a very fun, relaxing game. I like to play it just to kind of chill out. I mean, of course, you always try to win, but in this game, you get two characters that you get to choose from, and each one will have probably a different money start, but then each one has a different power. Like one lets you draw an extra card or something. When you go to see a friend, you get to choose, and then you get like an extra coin, and one guy gives you a discount when you go to the market. But these games that have variable powers, each player gets a different one, is great. And if you have multiple variable powers, even more the better, or if they, can adapt through the game to acquire them, which is also fantastic. But yes, coming in at my number 6 is variable player powers. My number 5 is area control. I love controlling area. I mean, I'm kind of a heavier guy, so I take up area anyway. So when I eat, like in, my lunchroom or whatever, I'm like, oh. But anyway, in games, a good example of this would be 1893 World's Fair, or one of my favorites, Blood Rage, right over here. There's a lot of mechanics in that game, but you want to try to control different areas, usually to build up quest points and such as that. But area control is a fantastic mechanic, and there's so many games that do it and do it so well. When I discovered what this ability was, this mechanic was in games, it just kind of like really opened and enlightened my world. And now I love it when they mix it into 3 or 4 different of my favorite mechanics, and then area control is one of them in there. It really just kind of hits a sweet spot for me. So anyway, coming in, my number 5 is area control. Coming in at number 4 would be dice rolling. I love this mechanic. Who doesn't like to roll dice? And I'm not talking about the typical roll and move, but I'm talking about games such as Dice Masters is an excellent one. You can, you roll your characters and hope that they come up and make decisions. Like you're getting energy to promote your characters to get into the field to battle the other person, and then you're building new dice to put in there, and then you roll them again to see, you're trying to get there. But probably the best example I can give in this case, just off the top of my head besides that, would be King of Tokyo. That is a heavy dice roller where you're trying to roll up to get the points. You're building energy to buy powers, or you're just trying to get points to point out before your opponents do, or you're trying to use claws to kill the other monsters in the game, which are the other players. But a lot of, get a roll and a re-roll. So a lot of dice rolling in that game. Anytime that I get a chance to chunk some dice, it makes me a happy man. So anyway, coming in at my number 4 is dice rolling. All right, coming in at number 3, I guess if I add those together, it's actually 6. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so coming in at number 3 is hand management. And a good example of this is probably like Century Spice Road, where you're trying to, you acquire cards and stuff, but then you're looking at, to get your engine rolling, how to use your cards effectively to play, when to play them, when to hold them, when to bring them back to your hand. It's a very good mechanic, and there's tons of games that do hand management and do it well. But off the top of my head, Century Spice Road was one that I feel like that really accomplishes this particular mechanic very well. I can't really say much more about it except for it's my number 3, and I love it. Okay, so we're down to the last 2. My number 2 favorite mechanic of all time is worker placement. And probably one of my favorite worker placement games is Champions of Midgard. When you can just you take one of your workers or Viking meeples and you put them out there and say, hey, I'm claiming these dice, or I'm claiming this card, or I'm sending, I'm getting a boat over here, or, there's just going to different places with your characters and trying to place them to do things. In most games you're limited to 1, but not always. Sometimes you have more that you can do it, but you're putting your little meeples to work for you, or your dice, whichever game that you're particularly playing. But worker placement is a fun thing, and it's my number 2 mechanic of all time. So number 2, worker placement. And my number 1, yes, I play air drums. My number 1 is card drafting. A fantastic game to probably talk. It's in so many games like Blood Rage and others. But Terraforming Mars comes to mind as one of my favorite card drafting games. You can play it as, you know, the basic way, but when you add the drafting mechanic, where basically, you know, a very simple game to do is like Sushi Go. You know, you pick a card, you pass them, you pick a card, you pass them, and then you use the cards that you have. Terraforming Mars is a fantastic game, and it's really, like, it's good, but it's super fantastic when you use the card drafting in it. And in Blood Rage, when you use the drafting, I mean, that is probably the meat of the game, besides just trying to make decisions as you go, because of the cards you have in your hand. So that's a mixture of a little bit of all the elements between hand management, but just to draft the cards that come into your hand, I probably love, well, I do, it's my number one. I love that mechanic probably better than the next three in line. I mean, just the card drafting is something that is just so fantastic to me that I really love. It just has to be number one. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching The Dice Matrix. I appreciate your time, energy, and kindness. And until next time, keep the dice rolling or drafting cards.